All right, this could be the week that the clock you are looking at strikes zero and the federal government officially runs out of money. Now, it was an action-packed weekend on Capitol Hill with rumors circulating that a budget deal had been struck between House Republicans and Senate Democrats. But those reports were, at the very least, tentative because an official agreement has still yet to be reached. But have no fear, America. Fresh off a Sunday round of golf, President Obama is now ready to roll up his sleeves and get down to business.
Earlier today, invitations were extended to Speaker Boehner, Senate Majority Leader Reid, Chairman Dan Inouye, and Chairman Hal Rogers to a meeting tomorrow at the White House with the President to discuss ongoing negotiations on a funding bill to bring us through the end of this fiscal year. He looks forward to having this meeting. He thinks it's important, and he thinks we need to reach an agreement because an agreement is within reach and get it done.
All right, so what will the magic number be at tomorrow's meeting? Now, the rumored $33 billion in cuts, well, is that going to be the number or closer to the House GOP's initial proposal of $61 billion? Here to help sort through all of this is South Carolina Senator Jim DeMint. Senator, welcome back to the program. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Sean. It's good to be back. And this is, I guess, a complicated week with all the numbers they're throwing around.
Well, it's going to get more complicated. Paul Ryan will be on this program tomorrow. He's going to outline, unless we're in jeopardy of a government shutdown, I think he releases his 2012 budget, which I understand, in spite of reports, is going to be closer to the $6 trillion mark or higher in real cuts. And look, you had a piece out, America must get a balanced budget or the country's going to go bust.
Right.
So it's that dire. Explain to the American people.
Well, we've got to get on the same page here in Congress, Sean. The Democrats are not even engaged in the real discussion here. They voted against a resolution a few weeks ago that would have called on Congress to balance the budget. We need to pass a constitutional amendment that would force Congress to live under a balanced budget. If we don't do it, the Democrats will continue to sit on the sidelines and just complain and criticize every time we try to bring up these things that need to be cut. They're already criticizing Paul Ryan for making changes in Medicare that need to be made. I think it's going to create a lot better product, a lot better health care for senior citizens. But they're criticizing it because they don't feel like they have to make any cuts. But, Sean, as you know, if we don't balance the budget, we're going to effectively bankrupt our country. And that's the first thing I think we need to do. Right. And hopefully we'll get a vote on it in the next few weeks.
Governor, I'm a registered conservative. I wrote a book, Conservative Victory, not Republican Victory. And here's my point on that, is they made very specific promises when we had this historic election. They said they would repeal health care. They've done it. They said they would, after the repeal, they would defund it. They're in the process of doing it. That's part of what H.R. 1 is about in the House. But they also promised that they'd make the $61 billion in cuts this year. Some people are saying, Hannity, just forget this year. This is only tens of billions. My argument is if they are pressured to give up their principles here on $61 billion, how are they going to hold the line on $6-7 trillion?
Well, if we don't put up the fight now, when are we going to put up the fight? And it's going to be hard for me to vote for anything less than what we promised. But more important than the amount, Sean, because effectively, you know, we're arguing about 2 drops in a bucket, basically, as far as the amounts. But what does this fund? If it funds Obamacare or Planned Parenthood or public broadcasting, if we don't take the funding out for these things that are so obvious, then I think it's going to send a signal we're not serious about standing for those things we talked about last year.
Look, if we can't cut $60 billion of a $3.7 trillion budget with $1.65 trillion in deficits, we're never going to reform Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Interestingly, all things the president says we need, but he punted when he was given his opportunity.
You're right, and I agree, Sean, but it's hard to fix it in the middle of the year. Last year, when the Democrats had complete control of the government, they didn't pass a budget, they didn't fund the government, and now John Boehner is trying to pick up and make this happen, and they did pass a $61 billion cut to the current budget, which Harry Reid killed in the Senate. And as you said, Obama has been AWOL on any leadership here, so it's hard when you just control one house of Congress to actually get this done. I'm going to continue to insist that we stick to that number. I thought it was too small when it first came to the Senate and voted against it. Only a few of us did. Yeah. But the big battles are ahead with the balanced budget amendment, the debt ceiling, and we need to get the American people engaged with us.
All right, Rasmussen poll recently out shows that on the economy, the president's rating is 34 approve, 66 disapprove. When you break it down even further, it gets worse for the president. With independents, it's only 21% approve, 78 disapprove. And then on moderates, it's 36 approve, 63 disapprove. And with women, a demographic he did very well with, it's almost the same. Apparently, and he's not getting better marks on national security either, Senator.
Well, that's encouraging to me, because I think the president and some of the Democrats think the American people are stupid. And it's pretty clear from those polls that Americans understand what the president is doing to this country on health care and many other issues. And so hopefully as we go through these budget battles here, that Republicans will get their courage from the American people and see the Americans are tuned in, they are watching, and they want us to stick to what we promised during the last election.
Yeah, promises matter. And, this is almost, in my mind, Senator, the equivalent of read my lips, no new taxes, and if they capitulate now, I think the Democrats will almost hold them hostage, and they'll keep threatening a government shutdown, and if it works on $61 billion, it'll work on $7 trillion.
You're right.
All right. So thanks, Senator. Appreciate you being with us. And coming up, the Quran burning pastor is back. How his actions this time may have put our national security at risk. But when we come back, Geraldo Rivera comes under fire in Libya as he reports on the Allied war effort there. He's going to join us live from Benghazi. That much more coming up straight ahead. And the victor of the so-called kinetic military action in Libya may not be the Allies or even General Gaddafi. Instead, it could be al-Qaeda that comes out on top. Now, according to an Algerian security official, quote, al-Qaeda is exploiting the conflict in Libya to acquire weapons, including surface-to-air missiles, and smuggle them to a stronghold in northern Mali. Now, this news comes as today Italy became the third country after France and Qatar to recognize a rebel-organized group as Libya's legitimate government. Now, meanwhile, the violence there continues, and our own Geraldo Rivera was caught in the crossfire over the weekend. Take a look at this.
Keep going. They're firing on us. I think we should stay low. Get in the vehicle and go. Come on, guys, in the vehicle. Okay, they're firing at us. They're firing RPGs and mortars at us. Okay. Here's this. Right there.
And joining me now live from Benghazi is our very own Geraldo Rivera. Geraldo, I hope you're being safe there. Tell us what happened.
Well, we stumbled on the new front line near the oil-rich town of Brega, the important oil town. It's a refinery town. It's not an oil-rich town itself, but it is an important crossroads. It's about 135 miles from where I'm standing right now, Sean. The rebel army and the Libyan loyalists have been kind of locked in a violent embrace. One side has the momentum, then the other side has the momentum. But what I discovered over the weekend is that there is a bloody stalemate going on now at that town of Brega. There's two parts of the town. There's the new city, that's in rebel hands. Then there's the old city. Inside the old city is the University of Brega. It's actually a kind of trade school. It's called the Bright Star Petrochemical University. And when we were there, when we went walking up to the walls of that university, we suddenly came under fire. And before we knew it, we were in a crossfire. Behind us, the rebel army, that ragtag, ill-disciplined, inexperienced, very heavily armed, though, rebel army started firing over our heads. And the Gaddafi people in front of us were firing back at us, and it was a kind of a very interesting situation as the bullets zinged and the rockets zinged and the mortars zinged over our heads, Sean.
How close did this come to you, Geraldo?
Well, it came close enough. You know, first of all, there's so many guns being fired here. There's some I hear right now next to me in a celebratory fashion by people who have assumed a military role but without any kind of military training. But this was not that. This was actual warfare, and it came close enough that when you hear the bullets breaking the sound barrier past your ear, you know it's time to put your head down.
Yeah.
You know, without making the story about us, it really is a kind of stalemate that I I think the only interesting positive to this, Sean, is that because it is a military stalemate, perhaps the ground is more fertile for a negotiated settlement, or at least a ceasefire here, Sean.
What do you make of, European countries and Qatar now recognizing this rebel organized group as Libya's legitimate government? Especially in Europe, they have oil interests there, Geraldo. So, if the so-called reason for NATO's involvement was humanitarian, it does make some people suspect.
Well, I think that the people have every reason to be suspect. Italy, though, is an interesting case, Sean, because Italy was the colonial master of Libya for almost half a century. Until Italy was defeated in 1943 in World War II, they ruled here. They created this place. The country of Libya came after the defeat of Italy in World War II. They have vast commercial interests here. They get 38% of Libya's export trade is with Italy. Italy gets the vast amount of its oil from Libya. The fact that they are now recognizing the Rebel Transitional Council, I think, is a big deal. And it is for, I think, these people who know Libya so much better than we do to make the first steps. Let's see if they trust what is emerging here as a free Libya, Sean.
You're spending a time with what you described as these well-armed rebels. But our own State Department says, Geraldo, that they have al-Qaeda connections, and many other people have made the case. If that's accurate, do we run the risk that the rebels that we're helping are going to be worse than the Gaddafi we already hate?
That's a very good question. It's the question of the day, isn't it? But it's a lot of ifs. I've spent a lot of time, tracking down who's who here. Let me give you a quick example. I just interviewed a kid about an hour ago who was featured in a French newspaper as being an al-Qaeda leader at the front. Turns out the kid is a religious person, but his family vouches for him. He works in a hardware store. His father, his brother, the rebel forces all say that this French reporter put this kid's picture in the paper. It went out on Al Arabiya network, French 24 network. The kid's suddenly an Al-Qaeda mullah, and we took his picture of his passport, his family documents. It did not appear to me that there was anything extraordinarily suspicious about this, other than he was a religious person. So I really think that until we can prove that they really do have these radical ties, we better cool our jets, because I do think the vast majority of the people fighting here are fighting to be free of 42 years of dictatorship, Sean.
Geraldo, everyone said, there was even an article written, I'm obsessed with the Muslim Brotherhood. It appears that I was right, and everybody that said that democracy was going to emerge in Egypt was wrong. And I think to ignore these facts, I think, is to our own peril. Here's my last question for you. Look, what is the rebels, and you're around them, what is their reaction to the incoherent, the vacillating policy of the United States with no commitment to victory or no commitment to the removal of Gaddafi?
Yesterday was the first time here, to be honest with you, Sean, here in Benghazi, the rebel stronghold, the de facto capital of free Libya, that I heard any negative vibe about President Obama or the United States. Their fear here is that the U.S. is going to wipe our hands of what's going on here and let the Libyans, sink or swim on their own. I think that when you compare the vast majority of the people here, again, supporting what the West has done, what France has done, particularly what the United States has done, I think it's understandable. They are frightened. Gaddafi's tanks came to within a mile of where I'm standing right now, Sean, just 2 weeks ago. They put together this ragtag army, businessmen, unemployed people, clerks, gas station attendants, lawyers, doctors, gave them all these weapons. They're out there, fighting for their future. It'll be theirs to decide. It's their destiny to make. And I think that the United States will be remembered for making a positive contribution, though. That's my opinion again, Sean.
All right, Geraldo, do me a favor. Try and stay out of the crossfire, just once. Where if you're in Afghanistan, you're getting fired at. If you're in Libya, you're getting fired at. We want you to come home safely, okay?
Hey, where do you think I have these gray hairs?
Well, Adi explained my gray hair. There's no excuse. Geraldo, good to see you. Thanks for being with us. And coming up, deadly protests are up in Afghanistan after a small Florida church burns the Quran. We will examine what this effort means in terms of our peace treaty and the peace efforts in the Middle East, and we wonder, is there any limits on free speech? And then later, Eric Holder caves, announcing today that 9/11 suspects will now face a military tribunal. So I guess George Bush and Dick Cheney were right. Straight ahead.